Yeah, this is a brief outline of my personal journey from the SNP to UKIP. I got involved in politics in the late 80s. My local constituency was a staunch Labour supporting area where the votes were weighed rather than counted. But I saw a democratic deficit in Scotland which the Labour Party were not addressing, and thus I joined the SNP. At this time, the SNP were barely polling into double figures, quite similar to the position we're in at the moment. But by-elections like Govan, where Jim Siller's triumph, helped keep the party in the spotlight. As a young member of the party, I found the branch meetings relatively stale and thus got involved in the YSN, which is the youth wing of the SNP. I became the secretary of the Glasgow YSN and was later on the YSN National Executive, where I had the dubious pleasure of meeting such brilliant minds as Red Shona Robinson and Tricky Nicky Sturgeon. This was now at the time of the poll tax, and the activists in Glasgow were prominent in running the party's non-payment campaign. Thousands of signatures were collected, and the weekly stalls in the city centre helped to raise the profile of the party in the West. With Alex Salmond taking over as leader in 1990, the membership hoped for big things. But the party failed to make the breakthrough and took just 4 seats in the 92 election, while John Major triumphed for the Tories. The Labour landslide under Tony Blair in 97 was a game changer though, as suddenly a Scottish Parliament was a reality, and a vote for the SNP would no longer be seen as wasted. At this time, the SNP slogan of independence in Europe was a catchy one. The SNP had always feared being labelled as separatists, and their love of all things European allowed them to counter these arguments. But within the party, there were those, particularly Jim Fairley, who warned against the growing power of the EU. But at that time, myself and other nationalists were just happy to see the party gaining respect and becoming an established force within the Scottish Parliament. We never gave much thought to the machinations of the EU, nor the rising influence which it was wielding over the member states. As time wore on, I drifted out of the SNP, but it had lost its radical edge. It seemed to be just turning into another party of yes men, and its obsession with the EU seemed misplaced. Norway was always trumpeted by Alex Salmond as a role model for Scotland, and yet it wasn't controlled by Brussels. Indeed, the two most prosperous countries in Europe, Switzerland and Norway, were fully independent, which led me to question the SNP policy of further European integration. It was only by spending time in Ireland that I actually saw the true face of the EU. Ireland had bravely voted no to the Lisbon Treaty, but a dodgy rerun got Brussels the yes result it wanted. With the EU and IMF firmly in charge now, that country is but a shadow of itself and is simply a pawn in a bigger game in which Brussels owns the board and the pieces. The situation in Ireland and in some of the other European countries encouraged me to look again at the EU. The hand of Brussels was behind all of the major issues affecting the continent, and the UK was similarly being drawn into this economic and social mess. But one man was speaking up against this European madness, and it wasn't Alex Salmond. Indeed, it was only when I heard Nigel Farage last year telling Merkel and Obama to butt out of Britain's business that I finally decided it was time to get back in the political game by joining UKIP. We in UKIP are well aware of how we were sold a pig in a poke back in the 70s. We were told that Britain was signed up for a European free market, when in fact the master plan all along was to create a European superstate. This proto-superstate has already decimated many economies in Europe, and the recent disgraceful treatment of Cyprus by Brussels is a perfect example of why the EU must be dismantled. And yet our political leaders act as if all is well in Euroland. Mr Clegg can't wait to go over there to be a commissioner, while Mr Miliband has already stated that the British people will not get a vote in this vital issue. Mr Cameron talks tough, but his actions speak louder than his words, and his promise of a referendum in 5 years' time is an insult to the intelligence of the electorate. As for Mr Salmond, his stance is the strangest of all. With at least 30% of the Scottish electorate wanting out of the EU, the SNP have got no chance of winning a referendum where Brussels will simply take over the reins of power from London. If Mr Salmond had any sense, he would leave the EU issue open to be decided by a subsequent referendum should the first succeed. But by adopting a totally pro-European stance, he has not only betrayed 80 years of SNP history, but has ensured that the vote will fail. But the SNP's decline after the failed referendum will be to our benefit. By then, Mr Miliband shall be number 10, and the people of Scotland will be looking for a party which addresses the big issue, that of Europe. People in Scotland, and indeed the UK, want their vote to count. The They want the political parties they vote for to have a direct impact on their life. With the growing power of the European superstate, national parliaments are becoming largely irrelevant. And this is not only bad for the people, but bad for democracy itself. And as a Democrat, for me, there was only going to be one party which was worth joining. That party was UKIP. Thank you for listening.